Hello and welcome to today's episode of Served by SHFM, your food service hospitality podcast. The Society for Hospitality and Food Service Management is the only association focused on workplace hospitality and amenities in the food service industry. All right, hello and welcome back to Served by SHFM, your food service hospitality podcast. I'm your host, Michael Moore, and in today's episode, we're embracing the changing of the guard here at SHFM. We have new logos, we have new members, but most importantly, we have a new president to introduce. And we're also going to spend some time today looking and diving into her agenda and understanding her priorities for this term. So hopefully our listeners walk away from this episode feeling like they have a better understanding, not just of who our president is, but where we are as an organization and where she's going to take us. So on that note, I am very excited to introduce our 2022-2023 president at SHFM. She is the senior project manager at World Bank Group and an all-around wonderful human. Welcome, Sharon Eliatamby.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Michael.
Yeah, I'm excited. So this is an episode that we probably should have done last year with Rob, and we're going to look to maybe do this going forward. So Raquel, looking at you. But we, as an organization, there's a lot of us that come to every conference we can that have the ability and the travel allowance to go to New York or to go to national conference. And so we get to know a lot of the very active people in SHFM, but there's also our listeners. There's a vast majority that don't always have that opportunity. So we wanted to do this today to really let them see who you are, help them walk away from this feeling like they know you a little bit better. And I want to start that by really diving into how you got started, where you came from in your career. So I will say in my cyber stalking of you for this episode, as creepy as that sounds, it's a part of the process. We do have some crossover in our backgrounds, which is really fun. And I'll touch on them as they come up. But to go back there, to look back on your career, can you really tell me where it all started and when you took your first steps, maybe in the direction of culinary and hospitality? What was the first thing that pointed you this way?
I think the passion to travel. As you know, I grew up in Malaysia, and my dad was a civil engineer, and he used to travel all around the world. And when we can, as a family, like my mom and my brother, we would tag along and travel. And we used to live in and out of hotels. Just love that environment, and it feels like I want to say star-studded. Like you walk in there, you get the service and chandeliers, and I'm thinking, wow, do I really want to do this? And I wasn't sure, because I'll be very honest with you. Growing up in Asia, majority of the time, it's the boy in the family that gets the education, the boarding school, what do you want to do with your life? For the women, it's more like, okay, maybe after high school, do we marry you off? And that's what I said in my speech. If it wasn't for my grandfather, I could have been married off, and education wouldn't have been that forefront. But things are changing, and thank you, to my mom, who is a career-minded person, who kind of said, okay, what do you want to do next? And through the travels that we did, I was like, you know what? Let me try out the hotel world and see what that was like. So I did a short stint in Malaysia for 6 months. I was 16 at that time, and I worked at the Shangri-La Hotel, and it was just open. I worked in a banquets department, and my first assignment was to serve the Prime Minister of Malaysia. 16 years old, okay? And I swear to God, if you thought about, nervousness, I was like, first of all, why for me as a person who's not seasoned, okay, I'm just getting into this, be handling a VIP table. And I never looked back. I mean, I was nervous as hell, but I did a really good job. And then, and I guess, from the old timers, who were there at the hotel, they were like my mentors at that time, teaching me the ropes. When I got done that 6 months, I said, let me look at schools. And at first I thought it was Malaysia. Again, my mentality wasn't about going abroad. But the moment I found something abroad, my mom said, let's do it. I never looked back. So Switzerland, here I come. Okay. And, and in the Swiss, academic world, it's like 6 months school, 6 months in hotel and culinary. Like you go out there and you do your internship. That was really interesting because number one, I don't speak any European languages. All I do, I know a lot of, like 2 dialects of Chinese. And so listening to European language is very difficult. So it took me 6 months to learn how to speak German, be able to go out front in the world, to be able to serve the customers in German, because you had to pick French or German. And I picked German as a language because it was a very guttural language. It's very close to the Malaysian language. So I thought, okay, here I go. So, and the people who were actually working with me and teaching me German were the people who were from Yugoslavia and Turkey. So I was learning how to speak that language, first of all. That's how they taught you how to learn the language. And then you learn how to speak the proper language. So Switzerland was kind of an eye-opener to the industry, to culinary, to food, to service. And then it was, coming to the US, and I never looked back. And the funny thing is, when I came to the US, I thought I would actually pursue my career, continue in the hotel world. Didn't happen. It kind of took me to the B&I world. I was actually given the opportunity to pack up my bags after I graduated from Johnson & Wales to go work in England. And I worked with a Trust House Forte group, where Gardner Merchant was kind of the B&I world at that time in England. And what an eye-opener that was. It's so different. But when someone tells you, hey, do you want a 9-to-5 job? I'm like, what are you talking about? Monday to Friday, what are you talking about? I was like, it was fascinating. And again, it took food to the next level in the UK. I mean, they had, things like, desserts named like the spotted dick, things like that. And I was like, really? Why would you call that, for food? But it's so interesting. And then we started branching into law firms, where we opened little like snack bars and grab and goes, and then larger organizations like ICI. And that was another experience too, because back then I was also doing my internship with a butler, and it was interesting to see behind the scenes, because you have the lady in lordship that kind of he has to serve. And I said, looking at service in the hospitality world, because you always think that it's just about food, but you have to look at the back end of service, because there's some, for the butlers, it's almost like the hotel line of work. So he had to press up the newspaper first thing in the morning so that it looks fresh and pressed, no creases on a newspaper. And I'm like, okay, this is over the top. Prepare freshly squeezed orange juice and everything for them to start their day. And then in the evening, before he can, as we say in the British world, retire, meaning that before he goes to bed, he has to lay out the pajamas, ask them if they want a cup of hot cocoa, hot tea. And I'm thinking, wow, we should bring this guy to the US. I think he would do really well.
But butlering is a very prestigious profession in older parts of the world, with a very, very long history. It's not something, I think we use the term a little bit lightly here in the US.
Yes, we do.
And it is not something taken lightly at all, from my understanding. How did you get into that internship?
Well, it was through an aggressive interviewing process. So when I was graduating from Johnson & Wales, they were offering this position to a lot of the American students, but nobody wanted to pack their bags and go. So I put my hands up and said, I'll go.
Oh, yeah.
To go live in England for almost 2 years. I'm like, I'm coming. So, But the interviewing process was so aggressive. Like there were so many segments you had to go through. And I remember, the moment I got selected, there was also kind of an orientation I had to do. And it was with the Gardner Merchant office in Connecticut before I was actually able to go to England. And so that was how they got that program going. I think after my internship, there was one more student selected, and then that whole program went away, I think, because Gardner Merchant got bought up by, Sodexo at that time. And what's really cool about that, there was so many lessons learned, because you have the European way of managing, and then you have the American way of managing, so you learn how to, merge those two when you come back, to the US, because the US is very customer oriented, right? We're all about, servicing the customer. What does the customer want? I felt like in Britain it was very hierarchy. It's almost like you serve the bosses first before your customer. Like, what do those,
interesting.
So that's how I felt. I mean, that's what my, my perception. So I had to turn and when we talked about recenter your management skills back here. Now, doing paperwork and everything, of course, it's the same, but it's the management style is very different. It's very upstairs and downstairs syndrome. Now, this was back in the 90s, so things have definitely emerged and changed. Now we're talking about the 21st century. So,
And do you think that influence, kind of seeing the dichotomy between those, did that influence the way you look at leadership now?
absolutely. I think when we were young, you always think that, the louder you speak, the more things would happen and things would
Hmm.
get done, and it doesn't work that way. There, I've learned so much from so many different wonderful managers that come into my life. Those have taken time to mentor me and guide me. So no, absolutely, absolutely. And the funny thing is, when my grandfather suggested that I continue my education in the US because he believed that the management style and skills that the US can offer would help me out a lot, he was
Hmm.
not wrong. He was right, because the business mindedness and the way we do business in the US is so different from the rest of the world. And so he was really right. He saw something that I didn't see. All I saw was there was an out for me. And I was
Mm.
able to come to the US. I wasn't looking at anything else. And then, of course, when I came to the US, I was like, oh, wow, this, he actually makes sense.
So your grandfather played a significant role in kind of shaping or guiding the early development of your career.
Yes.
Was there a moment when you were traveling with him in when you were talking about earlier, it was with your grandfather, right? When you were traveling, or
Traveling,
was
no, no, with my father.
oh, that was your father. Okay, so
Mhm.
going back to that a little bit, just to sate my own curiosity, was there a moment when you were traveling with your father coming in and out of these hotels and kind of seeing the world at a really developmental age? Did you have like a yes moment, like this is what I want to do, or was there a single occurrence there that just really made you want to explore this world, or was it just
I
kind of everything together?
It was everything together, but I think my best experience was when I was in Hong Kong.
Hmm.
And going to Hong Kong and just watching the way they provide service in the hotels was incredible. You ask and it's delivered. There was never a no moment, and I was like,
Hmm.
wow, they don't say no. Like, I'm waiting for someone to say no, you can't have that. And all of us is like, yes, what would you like? It was like,
Hmm.
when I say it was, for us it's so hard to say, no, because we're such a yes society. It was that moment, and I don't know why. I thought that would be such a good thing in our world. Some people think I'm crazy, but to me, it was like they said yes, and I think that was the kind of the aha moment for me, because it was just making it easy for people. I'm all about when you're doing things and where it needs to be easy for the next person. You don't have to make other people's life difficult, whether it's your customer or even if you're doing it your own personal life. You don't want to make it difficult for others. You just want to make it easy. And that's why
Hmm.
I think that really opened my mind. In my careers as I was growing and just many walks of life. I think one of the things I always say to my team is like, other people could sell the dream, but we make that dream happen,
I like
because
that.
we are on the ground, right? We're on the ground running. So whatever you want, we're making it happen. We're making your dream come true.
So, in kind of looking at that, your family played a big part early on in kind of guiding you, and you're in the U.S. now. You've seen probably more countries, more culture than most people ever have the opportunity to witness at an early age. What happened when you got here? Tell me about kind of everything moving forward from when you entered the old U.S. of A.
So when I entered the US of A from finishing off in England, and my first job was actually at the World Bank. And I was
Really?
yes, talk about, 360. So my first job was back at the World Bank, I mean, at the World Bank, and I was actually a contractor at that time. And the way the World Bank, they had this contract where there was only one organization that was running the entire operation, and we had more buildings then before they actually started merging buildings together and decided to have some sort of a competition. And so I came here for about 2 years, learned a lot, because the World Bank, when you talk about culture, number one is 185 different cultures represented at the World Bank. And then from here, they moved, the organization I was working with moved me over to work in at a law firm, because at that time, of course, in the 90s, the law firms were slowly emerging and saying that they would like, cafes, because don't forget, back in those days, you used to be able to push carts from floor to floor, the tea time, the lunch time. Do you remember that? I mean, like, it wasn't a cafe, or even there's a cafe. Let's take the stuff up from the storeroom and create that into a cafe. It wasn't something that was when we're building something out, that's a forefront. It was like an afterthought. And then now it's like, okay, we want to offer, if you hire anyone or you build a building, it's like, where's the restaurant going to be? Where's that cafe going to be? Because we want that to be that focal point. So,
which is a beautiful thing, in my opinion. Now, I love that.
Because let me tell you, pushing those carts was such a pain, because if you run out of something, it's like the poor ladies, and gentlemen on the aisle when they're pushing the carts down to the airplane, and what do you want to drink, and what do you want to eat, right? Can you imagine we ran out of food and you have to run back down to restock and go back up again, and you're like, okay, number one, what floor were you on? Which desk did you stop at? So I was like, no. So from there, I think one advice I want to give everyone is, never follow your heart, because that was the stupidest thing I ever did. Was I left the organization, and at that time, I thought, what I thought was love, and then so I followed and went to go work at a restaurant, and I was like, what the hell was I thinking? That ended. And so then I got a job at the Reagan Building, the trade center, and I loved it. Oh my God, everyone thought I was crazy. I moved from a 9-to-5 job to a 24/7 job. So basically it was all events. That building was actually being built. And funny thing, Michael, I'll tell you this, it's like one of those things I manifested, because when I came back to the US, the Reagan Building was a hole on the ground. And all I saw was International Trade Center coming soon. And I said to myself, I'm going to get a job there. Hindsight 2020, in 1998, I got my job there. And I was like, wow, manifestation actually works, if you manifest for something. And so I got my job. And what was really interesting was the building wasn't ready, and we hosted our first 50th anniversary for NATO. So you imagine, 41 or 43 heads of state, meaning that presidents and prime ministers were converging in this building. We were still learning how to get around that building. If you've never been to that building, you will see that it's very hard to get around. We were working out of rooms that were not even ready, like construction sites, but we made them into quick kitchens. We were building that. I had to maneuver around Secret Service, because they locked up all those different places. But me, I found my way around and bypassed Secret Service. I was like, oh, that's a loophole here.
so you bypassed U.S. security. Go on.
Yes. Yeah, well, yes, seriously, it's like, hello, there's a loophole here. Someone needs to be here. But yeah, so from the Reagan Building, I stayed there for about 10 years, and I really had the blast of my life, because that is a government building, but we were able to do corporate events, fundraisers, weddings. I mean, you would never thought that you would bring a wedding to a government building, but we've done that. And they also have shows, and we used to do a wine festival there. So it was incredible, because again, from BNI world, and then I went into events, and at there when I was working on one of my events, my client, who was at the World Bank at that time, she was doing a walkthrough. I'm like, oh, what brings you here? So good to see you. And she said to me, my daughter's getting married. And then she stopped, and then she looked at me and she said, are you happy? I said, yes. Why? You have a job for me? I was joking. She said, by the way, yes, I'm retiring. Send me your resume. And I was, really? Okay. Didn't think anything about it. Wasn't looking.
I need a job like that one day.
I know, right? It's so the news is like, do not make anyone mad at you, because you never know how, where, what, because everything just revolves. And 16 years later, here I am, at the World Bank.
I think it's incredible in the stories that you've told so far. There's been a huge influence or a huge commonality in that hosting political, high profile political figures has just been kind of in your DNA of the hospitality journey that you want to. I mean, you looked at one of the first things you said was, hosting a head of state is the first table you'd served, and then now you're hosting NATO and doing all these things for the over a decade, and then people just come up to you and give you jobs, just throw them at you. So kidding, but
I don't
that's
throw them at me. I must say that was, to me, that was really fascinating, because honestly, I thought I was going to be at the Reagan Building forever.
Mhm.
And didn't think that I was, coming back to the World Bank wearing a different hat, right? Because from an
Yeah.
operator, and then you're coming over here as a client. But just going back to the Reagan Building, because we did a lot of work with the military, like the Marines, the Pentagon. And one of the things, because I'm all about learning and wanting to grow, I signed up for a class with the International Association of Protocol Consultants on the
Sounds
right way.
fascinating.
It's very fascinating, because you never know, about who to sit where, like especially with generals and the
Oh,
military. They
wow.
have a whole
I didn't,
protocol book. I never, understood
never
that,
would have
right?
crossed my mind.
No, and the first class that we took, the first session, let me tell you, this was really fascinating. It was like we had a 13 course, I'm not kidding, luncheon that they
Hmm.
had to teach us how to navigate the tableware. And then after that, they had us go through the class. I swear to God, there was no coffee. I would have been falling asleep. 13 courses at lunchtime. It was crazy. But it was amazing, because they were doing it the same way that the White House would do it.
I
Like when they have dignitary events, and they wanted to show us every flatware, how we would use, where should your elbow go, your wrist should go. We had to do that. And then we were given an assignment where you got to get to know your table mate. So they send you out to the restaurant. And that's
hmm
also, I didn't even know that was a protocol, because it's like strangers, who picks up the tab, how do you do the bill? And then you got to meet people like you don't want to know. And some people like, I want to keep in touch with you, because when it came to dividing the bill up, like what's the real protocol? It was very, very interesting. It was one weekend, and there was so much they were cramping in, and we had to learn. But I was able to use that for the Reagan Building, and now at the bank, because of the countries we're working with.
it sounds like that was, advanced butlery. If I were a college class, that would be called advanced butlery, I think. But that
I
was
don't know.
fascinating.
They would
I
tell you that that's what they want to call it, but yes.
and I'm gonna skip around a little bit. But before I do want to point out something. I mean, I made a joke about them, life throwing jobs at you, but I think, in my experience with extremely hardworking people, that is what it manifests, to use your words of manifesting something. I think rarely people just get jobs thrown at them. I think it's when it's because of 5 years, 10 years, whatever that amount of time of absolutely just crushing it with work ethic and showing people what you can do. So I think just to point out that I understand, why that came, and probably how much harder that must have been, especially in our industry, to be recognized in such a way. Um, for hard work. So, kudos, kudos to
Thank
the
you.
to the career path. But everything we've talked about, so much of it has been success, 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 which is amazing. But I do want to focus not on anything negative, but I want to talk about risk for a minute, because I feel like the most successful people in our industry have always been risk takers, but that doesn't always pay off. Can you think of a time when you took a career risk that maybe just wasn't what you thought it was going to be? I want to know about the risk. I want to know about what happened, but I really also want to hear about how you came back from it, or what you did afterwards.
I think I want to share two things. I think one, um, before I went and followed my heart to that restaurant, because that was one risk, um, working for the previous company, which is, the corporate company, as women, and that was the first time for me. I don't believe in the women and men, the divide, right? For me, it's like, get the job done. All we're here is just to get the job done. It's not
Hmm.
about, the gender thing. It did, and maybe I was oblivious to that, and I wasn't paying attention to that. But when I sat back to reflect, I should have been more vocal. So, for example, when I was like I said, hardworking, and I never say no. I was always sent to troubled accounts, and I would go there, work on the books, fix everything, get it up and running, and clients happy. Then I move on to another account. So I was kind of like the fixer.
Hmm.
But then when it came time for the promotion, I was told I was not ready. and therefore you still have growth. But they weren't going to show me what that growth was like, right? All they said was, you know, you're not ready. Meanwhile, someone who did not have, the experience the way I did and wasn't sent to all these accounts to fix, to understand the ins and outs of the business, got the promotion, but it was a man. And for me, it's like the risk would have been I could have just, walked away and, and just threw a negative attitude and stuff. I didn't. I just like kicked that pebble on the ground, as you call it, and then perked up and say, you know what? It's okay. It wasn't meant to be. That's my mentality. I'm always like that. Because I don't want to see the negative in the world, and then the more you get to know me, I'm not that type of person. I always feel there's good in people, but deep down, I felt like, wow, I worked my butt off, and what is it, showing me? Nothing. And that's when I followed my heart. Stupid, big risk, stupid move to go work at a restaurant, and restaurant wasn't even my background. It's so different, right? I'm events. I'm running, B&I world. Running a restaurant is so different.
Oh yeah.
And the risk there was ridiculous. So much so that when the restaurant was losing money and our paycheck was bouncing, we had to cash out through the restaurant. In the by the end of the week, when you get paid, you wait for the sales, and you better be the first one to stand in line and cash out on your paycheck. If not, you're not going to get paid, because whatever they put on that paper goes into the bank account, it bounces. So those were the risk, and I think, at that time I was like, you know what, there's always something for me. And so therefore that's when I was able to go. And the funny thing is, I interviewed at the Reagan building. I went in earlier on when I was working at the law firm to check out what the competition is doing. I went in camouflage as a waiter.
Really?
Like an undercover boss. I did. I had my tuxedo. I put it on because the law firm would always hire the outside companies to come in to do the big events, right? Because they didn't think we could do it. We could do it, but they just didn't want to allow us to do it. So they brought in those other companies to do it. And so I wanted to go to, like the Reagan building at that time to see what were they doing that's so different than what we're doing. And it was nothing. I mean, it's just that they had more props. So give me money and I'll buy more props, right? But I think by me making friends and just putting myself out there, I was like, you know what? You'll be able to find something. So there was an opening at the Reagan building, and that's when I left the restaurant and I went there. So to me, I think those were the type of risks that I took. I think it could have been, put the blanket over my head and say, oh, that's the end of the world. But I didn't do that. I actually move forward, with my next steps.
That is something that could easily have gone, I think, in my experience, into I'm done with this. It's too volatile. It's too, because when you look at, especially restaurant, anybody who opens a restaurant, runs a restaurant, kind of ties their career to a restaurant, that is one of the biggest risks because it is so difficult. My first chef ever in culinary school, who ended up being the dean later on, and I still stay in touch with him today, the best advice he gave me was never open your first restaurant with your own money. It's like you can do absolutely everything flawlessly and it will still fail. It's so hard. And it's one of those things that you can walk away from that experience just absolutely finished with this industry. So I think it takes a certain level of fortitude that I wish I had earlier on to look at that and say, nope, I'm on to the next, and just kind of shrug it off, because that has to have served you really, really well throughout your career, because there's so much in food service and hospitality that can just kind of hammer you down over time if you let it kind of become more important than it really should be. So I don't mean the events that we handle and the events that take place aren't important. They are, but the way it impacts you on a personal level, just the ability to shrug that off and say, all right, on to the next. That's incredible.
No, absolutely. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there were tears and stuff, but the thing is, like, you don't allow that to. There's always tears, right?
Yeah. In my life, there's always tears.
There's always tears, but it's that not to allow it to bring you down. It's like, what can you do next? And then I think that's taught me a lot and especially now in my environment and working at the World Bank, because one of the things I must say that, if you think you had a bad day, but think about the countries that are going through whatever they're going, like Ukraine or Afghanistan, because those are the work we do with those countries. You're not having a bad day. You're having an okay day compared to what they're going through, because they don't know when the next meal is coming. Do they have a roof over their head? And we're trying to help them, rebuild and do all that stuff. So I always remind myself, life could have been worse, but we're good.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I try to keep in mind when I'm, whining to myself about some problem that is not a problem. It's an inconvenience at best.
I like that. Yeah.
And then you look at the scale of problems in the world, you're like, I'm not struggling. Like I have a roof. I have a roof and my lights turn on. That is 99 out of 100 problems solved right there.
Exactly.
So that's good perspective, I think, leading into the next part of our conversation, which is, okay, success. Now you're president. Now you're head of SHFM. You're a few months into this. You took the gavel in October, and you've had a couple of months to get your feet under you and really settle into the role. So, tell me about it. What is going to be your presidency? What are you focused on? What are you working on?
Wow. That's a loaded question. Let's see. There's so,
you better wow me. You better wow me.
There's so many things going on right now. I think, the past presidents, they've already laid the foundation, and, for me, it can only get better. So, for example, with the new branding, with the new logo, the next is like the what's next, right? We want to get traction and more usage from our membership and even non-members. How do we attract them to our website, right? That could be a resource to them or for them to be members. That's one. Second is the mentorship toolkit that the diversity group put together. I think that for me is huge, and I would love to see the next level. Like, even we get like that, and I think I challenge a group of people to say, like, even if we get 2 or 3 people who sign up for the mentorship, a year, that it's something that we can, pat ourselves on the back to say, look, we're giving back, because that's really important.
Can you talk about that? Can you tell me about the program? Even as active as I am, I've heard snippets of it. I know it's bounced around a few different places, but I don't think most people or most members of SHFM really know what it is. So can you talk about it for a few minutes?
So yes, so the toolkit, I think we launched it, if I'm not mistaken, this past August, around that time, and it's basically bringing a mentor and a mentee together, and it's just a kind of how-to book to help you. So, as a mentee, you want to, career growth, or you need someone who is really known in the industry and you want to partner with them, right? And they can guide you in your, whether, it's your professional growth, whether there's someone you can, whether it's a coffee chat or a Zoom call, how can you build that relationship and continue to build that relationship? And there's like questionnaires and there is goal setting, and it's like it's like an A to Z kind of manual that will help, as a mentee, but also the mentor, because it tells you what the benefits are, right, for the mentor as well. Because some of, I'll be honest with you, some of us, are going to be rolling off and retiring pretty soon. And
rolling off.
I don't know if that's the right word. Sorry, but okay. And would like to find something to do and still want to be in touch with the industry. What better way of doing that, right? As a mentor. Mentee could be, the young professionals or the rising stars. You're coming up in your career and you want more. And it may not be, I'm going to be VP, I'm going to be president, but it could be also your own inner strength you want to build on, your professionalism that you want to build on, right? For me, I think career is never about today I'm a director, tomorrow I'm a VP, I'm a president. It's more to that. I'll be honest with you, just building on that. It's just because, for example, at the World Bank, titles are not important, because when I came from Director of Food and Beverage, my first job here was food services officer. I hated that title because I just felt like I needed a badge and say that I'm the food police. That's what I felt
It
like.
does sound like that.
Because it was terrible, but the job description, it was apples to apples.
Hmm.
It's just the title was horrible. And so I had to learn. I'll tell you, the World Bank has grounded me in that sense that forget about the titles. Your career path is this. Like SHFM for me is my passion. It's my career. It's helping me develop professionally. So I'm hoping that, with this mentorship toolkit, it will help both parties, whether it's a mentor or mentee, grow. They can learn from one another, they can help one another, and it will be good, for our industry too, because sometimes within our organizations, for example, I'm using the World Bank since I'm here, we have mentorship program, but our industries don't talk to one another. It's different, but
Yeah.
sometimes if you have someone from the insight within the industry, it can help navigate your career, or navigate you in the right sense, in the right way.
And it touches on, I think, a point you made before we started recording, which is how much of a struggle there is even in our industry to embrace a lighter workload or a transition into retirement, something like that. But imagine if you had the opportunity to, and the energy still to say, okay, here's my 20, 30, 40, 50 years, whatever amount of experience that is. I want to give people a head start so that they don't make the same mistakes I did. And, as someone earlier on in their career, I would have absolutely killed for that, just to say, oh, this is what I should and shouldn't do, at least from a certain perspective. Not that you have to follow it all, but just to know that someone's walked a similar path and here's what they ran into and here's what they did well and maybe could have done better.
Yep.
So how do we as a member, if I wanted to go on there and say I need to find a mentor, or if I said I want to be a mentor, how do you sign up for it? How do you get invested in it, or find more knowledge about it?
And that's what we're working on,
Okay.
because we have the toolkit. And I think that's the next step is, how do we go about signing up and stuff? And that's a very good question. That would be the next step. And that's part of the program and part of my agenda. Like, if I can get one couple, I'm just going to call it that, to start and have that format going, I think everything else will fall into place. So for me, it's like, I must say, kudos, to Rob, from RG3, that, he kind of set that platform. So now it's like, how do we navigate and make sure that happens, that it just doesn't sit in kind of that file to save, folder.
Okay.
So that's why I put the challenge out to the team to, let's get that going.
I mean, when it's ready, it's definitely something that should go on the new member passport that we launched in marketing last year. That could be a valuable thing for someone coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So looking at the time that you have, and obviously you've got some lofty goals to accomplish. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind, though? What do you want people to look at your term and say next year, 5 years, 10 years from now, when they look back at everything you've done or everything we want to do?
I think one of the things for me, and I definitely want to build on that, is be an inspiration to minority women. Right, I've been a member of SHFM, I think, going 15 or 16 years now, and I think one of the aha moments that came to me was when we had a diversity kickoff meeting, and I think Lauren asked a question, you know, um, you know, it's almost like, what do you think is one of your biggest achievement and goals, right? And I said being president of SHFM, because 16 years ago, I would never have thought I would be president of an association. I'd just be a continued member. I will support it, but never thought that I'd be here, number one, having a discussion with you, or actually, leading a really incredible and prestigious organization. I think, we've come a very long way. I want to see that momentum moving forward, where there is, I kind of created a platform. I've opened doors, to other, minority women to say, hey, if Sharon can do it, so can I. And also can be minority men, but at least, it opens that door. That's one legacy. I think the other legacy would be, We need to recruit more young professionals. I think that is an incredible what was created within SHFM to that foundation, and we need to continue doing that. And the other legacy is that I've been working very closely with Janine Cosgrove, on the foundation side, to build a relationship with other universities, and especially the historical Black universities on the hospitality program, right? Because nobody knows about, number one, SHFM, or the BNI world. I think all of us that go into universities and colleges really think about hotels and restaurants. BNI is kind of that hidden secret, right? How do we promote the BNI world to these universities and encourage them to partake and also be part of what we do? Because I think there are a lot of great things coming out of that.
And that's I mean, you're just talking about the advantage of knowing about a BNI and food service management in general. To that point, when you said earlier, one of your first positions when they said all of a sudden, it's a Monday through Friday, and how that blows your mind. I remember that when, and the same thing, I moved from catering on the West Coast. We did, all the big Fox shows in the 2000s, but it was an 85, 90-hour work week every week. You worked 6.5 days a week. And I remember when I became an executive chef for Sodexo, in my first couple of months there, my boss, she would say, I'm really sorry, but you might have to come in maybe a Saturday for a few hours. It's like, that's it. It's like, I'm used to working every day until my body just gives out. So the work-life balance you can find and still have a passion for food and creativity and kind of get that back. That's one of the most incredible advantages in our industry, as well as, it does compensate well and allow so much career growth in different directions, where in a restaurant, you can be an executive chef and an owner and kind of maybe top out there unless you're opening more locations. But here, there's so much you can do. I mean, look at the path your own career has taken and, where it still can go. There's really a sky's the limit in this side of our world.
No, I totally agree with you, and it's, I think our industry is such the hidden secret.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
So when I say that, people are like, really, Monday to Friday? I say, yeah. Like even here when we recruit at the World Bank, with the team, I say it's Monday to Friday. There's only 2 weekends in the year you have to work, and it's our spring and annual meetings. That's it. You have your weekends with your family, Monday to Friday. And now, you can see, like, with the hybrid workforce, whether Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays are just like crazy busy. Mondays, all right. And Fridays, like everyone's on vacation. So it kind of slows down. It's like, wow, catch up day on Friday, literally, and I think just to also, to divulge more on my legacy is also to build on the women in culinary. I think because I know we have the ACF, but I would like to see us strengthen that relationship with the American Culinary Federation and SHFM too, because then we can build more on the women in culinary, and within the companies that are sponsoring SHFM. They have fantastic, culinary women in culinary, and I think we need to bring them to the forefront of the industry.
And there's so, the ACF is a wonderful organization. I know so many really, really talented chefs there that are highly active in it. But I'm always happily surprised by the kind of growth we've seen in the culinary world for women in positions of influence. But there's so much work to be done there. How do we marry those two things together? I know they're separate organizations, but culinary is so important in our organization. And I think we tried to showcase that especially well this last year at National Conference by highlighting our chefs and making sure that their accomplishments are shown more than just one evening. How do we do that? How do we bring more culinary into SHFM?
Food speaks to everything, right? I mean, everywhere you go is like it's food. And I think, it's bringing them more when we're doing the planning process, bringing them more to the table for more discussion. Right now, we're kind of in the early stages, the first year, again, Rob did this last year, and he went to the ACF event and brought them to SHFM, and I want to continue that. So right now we're scratching the surface, but I want to see us do more. I don't have a big picture right now, to be honest with you, because my thing is when we do events, we bring in the women in culinary, right? So we can showcase them, and then have them at the round table, because they are the ones who would have better ideas of maybe their teammates or their team members who are talented chefs who are not recognized, bringing them to the forefront. It's almost like a paying it forward type of game, I want to say, but having more of a dialogue conversation and then showcasing their talents, like whether we have events, whether it's a spotlight on our newsletter, it could be anything.
I like it. Well, usually I wrap up these conversations with one question. I'm going to do that, but before I do, I want to make sure that we've covered everything that's important to you in your time as president, topics that are near and dear to your heart. Is there anything we missed that we should know as members that really drives you forward, that is going to be a focal part of your presidency?
No, absolutely. So I think one of the things, and I think one of my passion for SHFM is like all the committees, right? I don't think we would exist without the help and work that the committee members have put in, the chairs, the foundation. Everyone has a I want to say a task, but a responsibility, and they take it like a full-time job, because we all have our full-time job. Doing what we do is quote unquote kind of a volunteer position, but we put in passion like it's a full-time job. And so I want to give kudos to them, because without them, I don't think it would drive our success. I think because of them, it's like it brings a lot of success, whether it's membership increasing, the even for yourself, I mean, the things that you do with the podcast and helping us with marketing and membership, like putting us out there and letting people know who SHFM is, right? The Diversity Council, what they're doing with the Conversation That Matters, or coming up with the mentorship toolkit, showing that we do matter, and this is what we do. I think it's so incredible. And I think to the volunteers out there, it's like if you sign up, it's just not signing up and putting your name on that list to say, oh yeah, I'm part of this committee, but be present and participate, be there and help and be the voice. Because if you don't be the voice, we're not going to grow. And I think that's one of my biggest things that I want to make sure that I put it out there, that without the committee, I think it's hard for the organization that supports FSA, that supports us, for SHFM to handle, because we rely on the committees to get everything done.
I think that's really important to end on, is that signing up for a committee is more than just putting your name down on a list. It's volunteering, is being active, and we always say lean in, but the impact that you can have in the organization overall, if you're an active member on a committee, it's huge. And I think it's one thing where a lot of new members say, I talk to a lot of new members when they're coming in and just kind of give them here's what I think of SHFM. And they're nine times out of 10, their goal is always like, I want to know key players. I want to be recognized in the organization. And I can't tell you how important it is to simply be active and raise your hand when somebody says, I need help with something. Because as soon as that happens, I and everyone else will send you, right to Tony, right to somebody, and say, okay, we got someone here that wants to put in the work. And immediately you're in the circle of people that are active and known. To be honest, it's just known, which is.
Sorry, Michael, not to interrupt, because when you were saying that, right, we think about this past conference that we just had. We had so many new members, but all the feedback we got was it felt like a family. Why? Because these are the people who sign up in the committees. It's like, Michael knows Amy, or Sharon knows Lauren, and then Lauren, introduced Sharon to Sandy. It's like that, and that's how you built that, because it just felt like everybody knew one another. It was such a fun event. There was no, although sometimes, we go in our little cliques because we're comfortable with our clique group, but it wasn't like that. You could jump from one clique to another clique and still be able to have a conversation and get invited in, and you weren't like push out, I don't know you, I really don't want to talk to you. It's like,
I love
did you feel that? I mean, yeah, and that's the thing, and that's why I think it's so important that when people participate in this, if you're an introvert after you join the committee, you're no longer going to be an introvert.
Yeah, you're not given that option anymore.
Yeah,
It's true, but
you are the voice.
And that's what drew me to SHFM in the beginning, and that's what keeps me here, is that it's become very, very close, and my network has grown, but my friendships, more importantly, have grown as well.
Exactly.
Because of it. So, on that note, I want to thank you for coming out. Thank you for sharing kind of your vision, your background, helping us really understand you a little bit better, and really what drives you, because I do think that's important for understanding why you want A, B, or C to happen at SHFM. It's understanding what got you to where you are. So I want to say, thank you for sharing that, but ask one more question before we go, which is, if you could look back at Sharon starting out her career, maybe it was that moment traveling with your family, or maybe something your grandfather said, but if you had an opportunity to go back, reach through time, and say, give one piece of advice to yourself, what would it be?
You know what? Don't be so hard on yourself. Yes. No, because you know what? I'll be honest with you. You see this is all smiles and everything, but deep down, I do a lot of, did I do this right? Or why didn't I do it this way? Oh, I should have done it, or should have said this. And it's like, I think very, we do exude confidence, or we show that because we have to show that to our teammates, you're the people that we manage, right? Because you are the leader. But leaders behind the scenes, we have like, did I do this right? Was I supposed to say that? We go to that, and it's okay, to feel that way. And I always remind myself, don't beat yourself up, because I tend to do that. And when I was younger, I used to do that a lot. And I think I've learned through my career, and that's why even going back to like the mentors that I've had really helped me, navigate that thought process, to stop doing that. Why are you self-doubting yourself? You've already made that decision. Move forward. It's like you can't change that, but you can just be better. So that's what I would tell myself.
Such great advice for not kind of getting stuck in the mud of kind of a career progression, of just wondering if you could have been better, but rather just head down, move forward, and keep moving onward and upward, I guess. I like that. Well, thank you again for coming on. Thank you for sharing your insights and your goals. And I hope everyone that's part of SHFM is listening has a better understanding of where we're going as an organization, and hopefully where we're going to be next year at this time when we have another one of these conversations of, what's the progression of SHFM? How are we becoming better as an organization and as a group of career-minded individuals? So thank you everyone for listening. And that's today's episode of Served by SHFM. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Served by SHFM, your food service hospitality podcast. Please keep in mind that the views and opinions expressed on today's episode are not necessarily those of SHFM or any of its members.